Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Noah, and in this video I want to share my thoughts as to why I believe the current education system here in the United States generally tends to waste a great portion of our lives. So this video is, like I said, all about my thoughts on how the education system in its current form, the way that it's generally structured here in the United States, is not conducive to letting people really get on with their life, right? And that is the ultimate goal, I think, in life nowadays, is that, you go to school, you do sports, you spend time with family, and then you go get out into the working world, right? You get a house, you have an apartment, you get in a relationship, and then you have kids, and, there's this general structure. And my thought right now is that we waste so much of our time kind of in that 0 to 25, 26, 27, even 30 with education, right? And this is assuming that that the individuals that I'm kind of referencing or talking about here go on to do higher education, right? College and so on. And this period really between kindergarten, college, and higher education, right? So your master's or whatever it is a long time, right? That's many, many years, generally speaking. And there are certain instances where some people can complete all of that, prior to being 25 and so on, which is very, very rare. But my thought generally is that this period, it's just not the time that these students have, and I have, and then you've had, and so on, is just not used efficiently. There's so many more efficient ways to kind of go about this period to get people into kind of that desirable state, right? Where they have a consistent job, they have a good job, and they can start forming a family. They can really get their priorities straight, right? They can kind of understand the complexities of life and start taking action to ensure that they're living a life that's actually worth living. And as it currently sits, I think people don't start figuring that out until their 30s, right? To be quite honest with you, some people a little bit earlier, like I said, depending on your situation. But the way our education system is currently set up, and I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit, or the imperfections with that in just a little bit here. But the way that it's set up, it prolongs our ability, or it prolongs our the period before we can actually start exploring the world and doing some more extensive traveling, and really just being able to focus in on our life and how we can better our life, our family's life, our significant other's life, and so on. So one of the main reasons why I believe this is the case is that throughout high school, elementary is kind of, I think it's okay the way it is, right? People are, kids are stupid, right? They don't know much. But in high school, you grow up kind of fast, right? Or at least some kids do. That's a big period that I think is kind of the culprit. And I'm going to kind of get into that now. So in high school, right, a lot of stuff happens, right? You go up to the bigger school, right? And you take some more advanced classes, and you do sport, higher competition sports and so on. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is this period before college, right? Because college, generally speaking, is another big school. But what do we do in college? College is really the step prior to, or that's getting us ready to get into a field that we're ideally or supposed to be staying in for a prolonged period of time, right? Because it's higher education, so it's very specified, it's very specific. It's higher education. That's what college is, and you fork over a obscene amount of money, in my personal opinion. Even on the lower end, it's just very, very expensive. Everybody knows that, and a huge amount of people in this country have tens of thousands of dollars of student loans that they'll be paying back for quite some time. But I think the main component that the current system that we have in the United States here struggles in is the high school portion, because in high school, I really don't think, we have classes in high school, right? We have your mandatory ones and your electives and so on. But one thing that high school really, or at least my high school, didn't focus on, and I think this is the same for many people's high schools as well, the biggest issue that they didn't focus on was trying to educate young students on what was actually out in the world, right? What people are doing for jobs, what type of lives do they live, how much higher education, how much college they needed to go through in order to get to where they are, and so on and so forth. And what high school really becomes is just another 4 years of just kind of dicking around. You, in my personal opinion, you're required to take classes and electives and so on that really shouldn't be necessary, right? And this kind of goes back into my point about wasting so much of the students' valuable time throughout these 4 years that they have. A good example that I can come up with that is my own personal example is that when I was in school, when I was in high school, um, gym class, physical education was required, and I think that's good, right? I think we should be, people should know about physical education, except if you're already in physical education outside of school, right? I did two sports throughout high school, or the majority of high school, and I was required to take a gym class for whatever reason. And during the gym class, I was penalized, however you want to call it, for not partaking in a serious manner, right? So, I'm not going to get into all of that, but basically, I was required to take this class that's an hour a day, 5 days a week for a semester, to a semester, a year, 2 years, whatever. A lot of hours, right, went towards this requirement in quotes. When the reality was is that I mean, does it seem logical that someone who's doing two sports, right? Summer sport, spring sport, do they really need to be in a gym class? Could they use that time for something else? And the answer was no. It was a requirement. So this is one example. And I think there's other examples that are maybe a little bit different. I think a lot of courses in high school are maybe a joke. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that, but my point is that there's so much time that could be used to kind of educate students on what careers are in around the world, right? Putting some time into having these schools could put time into having relationships with hospitals, with the city, with just companies, just in general, to do job shadowing, right? To show kids what's out there. And the reason this is so important is because what comes after high school, right? The expensive, time-consuming period of studying for what you're going to be doing. But if you didn't look into anything in high school, how are you supposed to decide on what you want to study to then set your life up, right? So what happens, right, when you have this kind of miscommunication, right, where you're trying to decide on what to study in college when not knowing what the end result is, right? There's a huge gap in knowledge here. What happens is that kids tend to go to school, right, suffer through college courses that they didn't want to do, that they're not enjoying. They graduate, and then they end up not wanting to do what they studied to be, whether that be for financial reasons, aka there's no money in that career. I think this is really, really common, and I think this is another instance, or a huge instance, where having that education in high school, right, talking to people, going through some research that's done, surveys that are done on income and so on, could essentially steer people clear of entire career sectors, really. That's one instance. Or they go through school and they're happy, and then they graduate, and then they get into a job and they're just not happy in that job, right? So they were happy in college just doing the courses, learning about something, but then they weren't happy working in that field because of money, or the background, or whatever it is. And then you have a bunch of people switching majors left and right. You have people going to school for 5 years and not graduating because they just don't know what they want to do. And the list goes on and on and on. I think the last one, and the worst one, is where you have someone who switches multiple times, and they go to school for 7 years, and it's think about how long of a period that is, what you can accomplish within at a company in 7 years. 7 years is a long time to get to know people, get to know the layout of the company, get to know different departments, and work your way up to a senior role, a manager role, and so on. But meanwhile, you're in classes, like I said, messing around. And then the worst case scenario would be if you go to school for that prolonged period of time, and then you get to the goal, and then you don't like the career that you're in, right? So the key takeaway that I'm trying to talk about here and hopefully get some thoughts going around, communities and so on, is that we waste so much of our children, not my children, I don't have kids, but we waste so much of our students or young students' time, especially in high school. I do think this would be nice if colleges had as well, because you're paying such a premium, but that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because if you enroll in classes and you're taking classes and then shadowing, and then you don't like the shadowing aspect, right? You don't like the reality of it, then you got to drop back out of those classes. When in high school, if you do the shadowing, you're still just taking high school classes. You haven't committed to anything yet. So it makes more sense that high schools should be kind of required to have different programs and electives and opportunities, almost required opportunities, in my opinion, for students to get to know what jobs are actually out there. You can do it, right? If you actually seek it out, and that's something that some classes had, where we'd have guest speakers and stuff like that. But certainly, 80+% of the general population in high school doesn't have that, right? They'd have to seek it out on their own, and what kid does that? So I really do think high schools are kind of a period or a section of the education system in the United States that really needs a lot of work to because it's so crucial, right? The decisions that you can make in high school really do have a lasting impact, and trajectory, on the, kind of on a good portion of your life. And if we don't start taking things seriously and really valuing people's time and making sure they have the proper knowledge prior to committing to something like college, which is, like I said, very, very expensive and very, very time consuming, we're going to have, all of these issues with student debt rising and people going in and out of jobs, right? Having a high burn rate at companies is something that's really common, because people go into it not really knowing, and they leave 6 months later, they leave 4 months later, they leave a week later, because it's just not something that they like. So I really do think there needs to be quite a bit more clarity and quite a bit more assistance for young students at the high school level, to start really making the United States a more productive country. But there you go. Those are a few of my thoughts as to how I believe the education system here in the United States tends to waste people's time, and now that I'm thinking of it, waste people's money as well. But of course, I want to hear from you guys as well. What do you think of the few talking points that I brought up in this video? Do you agree, disagree, or if you have anything to add, please let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts. But as always, if you've stuck along this far in the video, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.